Hi there, this is Elena with Black Sheep 303 Creative, and today is the last card in my Mother's Day card series for 2017. It is another card using three-dimensional hydrangeas and coreopsis on a wreath for a pretty card. And I apologize for the length of the video, but there's a lot we have to cover, so stick with me. Now to start off with, I cut a wreath using the Elizabeth the Craft Designs Garden Notes Grapevine Wreath Round die. I also cut all of the components for the coreopsis die from Susan's Gardens. Over there on the left, that's all of those pieces. And then on the right, I have the hydrangea dies all cut out. Now I did one each of the leaves and the round sort of base piece, and then 3 of the hydrangea petals. I cut all of this out on Gina K Designs cardstock, except for the white. The white was sort of an inexpensive, like Office Depot cardstock. But on this wreath, I cut this out of craft colored cardstock, and it's a really cute shape, but I wanted to add some dimension to it. It looked a little bit flat. So I grabbed a couple of my Spectrum Noir markers because I don't have any brown Copics for some reason. And so I'm using my GB8 here to add some initial shading all the way around on this wreath. And then a little bit later, I decided I need some additional shading, so I grabbed my GB10 marker, which is a darker shade, and I am using that to kind of sort of differentiate some of the branches from the other ones. And then I will smooth out that color with the GB8 to get a nice blend of sort of shades of brown onto this grapevine wreath in the end. And then for my hydrangea petals, I'll be using Copic markers, and I printed out a picture of a blue hydrangea that I wanted to copy. So it has kind of a yellow center and then blue around the edges. So for my yellow, I am using Y000 Pale Lemon, and I'm just coloring the middles of the little, I'm going to call them petals. They might be the flowers, actually, of each little flower. And then for my blues, I'm taking the dark blue first, which is B63 light hydrangea, and then just kind of adding like a dot or a swoosh of color to the very end of each petal. And then I take the B00 frost blue, which is the lighter shade, and I kind of smooth out that darker blue and make like a sort of a bigger bordery edge around each petal. And then for my green, I am using G02 Spectrum Green, and this is on Gina K Designs Apple Mint cardstock. And I'm just outlining the edge at this point, kind of randomly. I'm not trying to be super precise. I want it to look sort of organic and natural. And then I'm using my Susan's Garden toolkit, and I'm using this pointy leaf tool to draw a vein down the center of the leaf. I flipped it over onto the back, and I'm drawing from the back side. So it kind of creates an embossing on the front, and then I take my marker and I outline that. And then I'm going to take the Scoopy tool, I call it the Scoopy tool, I don't know what the technical name is, to draw some additional side veins, but that didn't work all that well. I mean, it was okay, but you can see how like the coloring gets kind of smushed up. And in the end, that was fine. I kind of worked with it and got it to look okay. So later, I use that pointy tool to draw the side veins in, and that works a lot better. Now the Scoopy tool, I'm using the smaller end of this. This is great for creating like sort of 3-dimension on your flower, on your leaf petals. So here's where I'm drawing in the vein and then the side bits with that pointy tool. And then I'll outline that with the marker. And I'm actually going to do that on all of the flowers, or the petals, the leaves on the hydrangeas, exactly the same way for all of them. I do have some extra ones that I use on the smaller bunch later. Now the Scoopy tool, as you can see, as I push down, it's causing the leaf to curl. And so that's how you kind of get good dimension on it. So if you do it on the back, then you're going to get it to curl away from like the bush. If you do it on the front, it's going to curve towards you, so it makes nice curves. Now this is the hydrangea middle that you build your hydrangea on, so that's like the large circle die, and you do like a swirling motion with the large ball stylus to get it into like a dome shape. And now I'm going to take the Kids' Choice glue, which is this great sort of heavy-bodied white glue that dries clear, and I'm just scooping it around the edge, and then I'm going to stick this down to a piece of like an extra piece of the apple mint cardstock in that dome shape. So sort of keep it domed up so I can build my hydrangea on top of that. And now I'm squeezing the base of the leaves around the tweezers to get like a leafy point shape, and then I'm going to stick that point in the glue and stick that under the little dome to add leaves to the base of my hydrangea mound, or ball, I guess it is in the end ultimately, although we don't get the full ball, we just get half of it, hence why it is a dome. And so that's kind of the completed leaves. Now you can put the leaves on later as well. I did that on one of them as well. It works either way. Now to shape your hydrangea flowers, I did it one way first, and then I switched the order, and switching the order was better. So here's the scoopy tool, and I'm pushing the edges of the petals like on the back side out, and then I'm using the stylus to push down the center to get a cup shape. Now I did the stylus first, and then I did the scoopy tool, but it works better if you do it the other way. So just from experience doing this. So what winds up, you create like where the flower like cups up and then the petals fold back away with that scoopy tool. So the stylus cups them up and the scoopy tool pushes the petals away. And you can change that. Like you can, depending on how you use that scoopy tool, you can get them to point towards you, away from you, like, you know, all different kinds of things to get really organic looking flowers. And that's sort of the beauty of these dies and the toolkit and the way you kind of put all this together. So here I'm doing it the way I would recommend, which is scoopy tool first, and then the stylus, scoopy tool, and then flip it over and use the stylus to push it down. That just seemed ultimately easier to me. But really, you can't really mess it up too much. Just do what feels good to you. It'll all work out in the end. So you just basically dip the flowers into the glue so the base has glue on it, and then you just stick it onto the dome in like a bunch. I kind of went around and around and then filled in here at the end to fill in any gaps to create like sort of this ball shape of hydrangea flowers, and that makes your hydrangea. Now for my coreopsis, I used Gina K Designs Wild Dandelion cardstock, and then to color it, I'm using Y08 Acid Yellow Copic to add some shading to the stamen, which is that like fringy piece on the right, and then the petals, the bases of the petals. And the shading is actually very subtle. Like the color of the marker, once it dries, is really close to the color of the cardstock, but it does adds a little bit extra. So I'm glad I did it. And I kind of want to make it as 3D and realistic looking as I can. Now this is the calyx piece that you're going to build the whole thing on. So you're going to use your ball stylus to make it like a mount, like a dome shape again, but you're going to have it more as a cup shape. And then for my petals, I'm using the leaf tool, the scoopy tool. And I kind of draw it 3 times on the back and then once on the front to give it some dimension and kind of break it up. Coreopsis tends to be their petals are more straight than rounded, but it does give it a nice organic feel to kind of use that scoopy tool to break up the paper and get it a little bit molded. And now, so I'm just dipping the point of the petals in the glue and then sticking it into the calyx to create that rounded shape. And now for the stamen, I'm cutting the little fringy pieces in half. And those are going to create the stamen in the center. And then the base, I'm kind of dragging through the glue. And then there's an extra tab that you just grab with your tweezers and then roll the whole thing up. And that will create your like little stamen in the center. And then if you just kind of spread out those little fringy bits and put glue on the base and stick it in the middle, it looks like a very realistic center for your flower. And now these are the leaves that I cut out of grass green cardstock from Gina K Designs, and I'm just drawing one vein up the center. They don't have as many veins on these leaves. And then I'm going to take my same green marker and just outline the edges and the leaf or the vein in the center just a bit to give it a little bit of dimension. And then I'm going to use my scoopy tool again to kind of give it some dimension and interest. And again, you can just kind of randomly scoop them in, scoop them out. It all looks good. And now just to adhere them down, you just dip the ends into the glue and adhere them together, and then adhere them to the flower, and you're good to go. Now for the smaller hydrangeas, what I did was I took that original piece, which is the piece on the left, and I cut it down, and now I'm doing that stirring motion to get it into a dome, the smaller piece. And I'm going to stick this onto the original piece as my base. And then just again, dip my little hydrangea flowers into the glue and stick them onto the mound. Same as I did for the bigger one. And then for the really little one, I used the big leaf as my mound. I just kind of shaped it. And then I stuck the hydrangeas onto that. And that made more of like a little, I wanted it to look more like a, like a smaller hydrangea that hasn't really fully bloomed yet. And to get a really like good cupping motion on those, I use the smallest ball stylus to really get them to stick together. Now you want to trim off any excess paper that's showing around your hydrangeas. You don't want to see too much green. And then I would very carefully use my Spectrum Noir gold sparkle marker and just touched it barely in the centers of each flower, because this marker does bleed out a bit, to give them like sort of gold sparkly centers. And I realize it's not realistic, but I needed some sparkle because, I have to have sparkle. And then for my coreopsis stamens, I am just rubbing some glue onto the fringy bits and then dipping it into Elizabeth Craft Design's cool diamond glitter to get sort of a chunky, glittery pollen look on the coreopsis. And to adhere everything to the wreath, I'm again using the Kids' Choice glue and just kind of smushing it on there and sticking it onto the wreath. And then I have a baby wipe that I'm kind of wiping off the craft mat as I go, just to make sure I don't glue it to the craft mat accidentally. And that holds it onto the wreath really nicely. And there you can see I'm sticking a couple extra leaves onto the last hydrangea there on the left. My greeting, I cut out 4 happies from the Happy Birthday die set from Elizabeth Craft Designs. I did 3 in white and 1 in gold mirror cardstock. And I'm just using my Zig pen to glue all of them together to create like a dimensional look on my happy. And then Mother's Day was stamped and embossed with gold embossing powder directly onto that white cardstock. Now I cut this out with the Elizabeth Craft Designs Fitted Squares die set. I used the second largest one there. And then this yellow piece of pattern paper I got from the My Favorite Things Sweet Celebrations 6x6 paper pad, and I cut that out using the dotted scallop squares die set using the largest die in that set. And that is going to come and become the base for my wreath. So I'll use my ATG gun to adhere my white cardstock, which is 85-pound Elizabeth Craft Designs white soft finish cardstock, onto my pattern piece. And then I'm going to adhere my wreath down in my happy. But first I wanted to show you how you can change kind of the feel of the card based on the color that you use behind it. So I originally considered this green. I thought it was actually really, really pretty. But it seems like kind of casual to me. And so then when I tried the purple seemed a little more elegant. So I went with the purple, and I punched a little heart and added some sparkle marker to that, just to pull the purple together into the design. But I think if you wanted a slightly more casual feel to the card, you could go with a different color, like that bright green. Now to adhere down my wreath, I'm using my Zig pen, and I did like kind of go nuts behind the blossoms with the glue to really make sure it's stuck down and stuck down well. That Mother's Day greeting is from the Lawn Fawn Happy, Happy, Happy. I figured the video was long enough, you didn't really need to see me stamp and emboss that. There are other videos available that show you how to stamp and emboss things, so I thought I could skip that. Now to pull in the blue from the hydrangeas, I added a little organza bow. It's a light blue organza, and I'm using a glue dot to stick it on the wreath, and I also thought that filled in kind of an empty space on the card in the upper right, and that is the completed project. And there you can see some sort of the sparkle and shine on the flowers and some of the little details. And I hope you like it. I was really thrilled with how it turned out. It's super dimensional. It actually looks very realistic. Like if you have not tried these flower dies, you have got to do it because man, it is really easy. They're easy to work with. They're actually pretty fast, and it's really hard to screw up. And look at how good it looks in the end. It's really, really fun. So if you haven't tried them, I highly encourage you to give it a shot. And I hope I've given you a little inspiration today. Thanks so much for watching. As always, you can find a supply list linked in the video description and on my blog. If you liked the video, I'd love it if you give me a thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed yet, why not? It's time you subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram at blacksheep303. Here are 2 more videos in my Mother's Day card series, so please click on either one of those to check them out. And as always, I appreciate you watching all the way to the end. Thanks. Happy Mother's Day.